Oh man, from the most crushing of lows to the dizziest of highs to the most crushing of lows again. I think we all have gone through a roller coaster in the last 5 months.
Yeah.
I say we, I guess I should clarify the Destiny community. Content creators as well, because I mean, Lord knows we had Into the Light dropping and all of a sudden it seemed like things might actually be turning a corner, and then the final shape drops, and briefly, up until the release of Elden Ring, which just about squeezes final shape out of the top slot, we are the #1 released game of the year on Metacritic, which is insane to me. A Destiny expansion has never gotten that high. So, I mean, critically, it was the best. And then, you know, a second round of layoffs came along, and it turns out that the final shape performing as well as it didn't technically matter. And that's crushing.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to put it. I think it's terrible for us in the community. Of course, it's terrible for us as content creators, but I think it's also worth sparing a thought for the developers, you know. The word internally from a bunch of different reports, I believe Jason Schreier and Paul Tassi have done the lion's share of reporting on this from the sort of summary side of things. And of course, Jason always has good inside eyes, but his work on what happened in the studio was basically that the developers were told that Final Shape was make or break, and now already there were trust issues with the Bungie leadership team, but now there are serious trust issues with the Bungie leadership team because they're now being told that Marathon is make or break. And you just have to sit there and imagine what the morale is like inside the studio after you've been told umpteen times that the next thing is make or break and that more layoffs will happen if things don't work out. Eventually you just treat management with scorn to a certain degree, I imagine. And, you know, that means great games don't get made because you can't trust the people above you who are giving you the calls, you know?
Yeah, I believe it's I'm not sure exact numbers. I'm not sure if anyone really knows. There's been a lot of numbers floating around, but we believe it's 220 roles in Bungie were laid off, which is 17% of the studio. And then an additional 12% was integrated into Sony, which is 155 roles. So is it overall like 35% of Bungie is no longer at Bungie and has been moved over?
Yeah, I think the total number, if you also include the layoffs from last year, you're looking at a studio that went from a size of 1,300 people to about 850.
Yeah.
So that's including a whole bunch of different things across two different sets of layoffs, the integration of some employees with Sony Interactive Entertainment where those jobs could be saved, and also the 85 developers that have been spun out into their own studio to work on the project that was in incubation that was codenamed Gummy Bears, whatever that might be.
I believe that was MOBA style, like fighter game. Like I saw a report, I think it was Jason Schreier or Paul Tassi who said it was like a kind of a fighter game, like a Smash Bros type MOBA.
Fighter game with MOBA aspects, which is the most... I have no idea what to expect from that. That sounds like the most confusing mashup of identities I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you take a... I just don't know how you do that. It sounds interesting just because it's a little bit like saying, hi, here's a half cat, here's a half dog. What does that look like? But by that same token, a half cat, half dog also sounds like a bit of an abomination, doesn't it? So
it sounds like a giraffe.
And hey, giraffes are cool. Maybe it is a giraffe, but who knows, right? Like, it's a big question mark, but everyone seems to say that it has promise. So who am I to judge until I've actually seen the damn thing, right?
I mean, they've been working on, by the sounds of it, a lot of different projects, and that also seems to be the problem and why kind of all of this is happening. I think Jason had a pretty good part in his article, which kind of is a top-down summary of all of this. Again, it doesn't go into the nuance of all of it, but he said that he spoke to 10 current and former Bungie employees, so that's a good estimate, obviously 10 people, but also you got current employees who are still there, still have a vested interest in Bungie, but also former employees who aren't there and maybe a bit more, would have a different perspective, and they, you know, all together can paint a pretty good picture. But they said, obviously a lot of them, or all of them, didn't want to be identified, but they said they described a company that grew too fast, tried to develop too many projects at once, spread their resources too thin rather than prioritizing its chief moneymaker, Destiny 2, which is kind of the gist of all of this. And obviously that doesn't kind of take any blame away from leadership, because it is leadership's decisions to ride this ship and make a gamble. And a lot of people said that Pete Parsons, who is it CEO?
Yep.
Yeah, CEO. And who is the who's the other guy? Like the founder?
Herman Holtz, I believe. Oh no, oh gosh.
Jason
the founder
Jones
of
or
Bungie,
Howard
Jason.
Ryan?
No, I believe you are talking about Jason Jones there.
Is he still there?
He's still there, but I believe he works in as a lead for one of the unannounced creative projects.
Right.
But it's also one of those things of, I don't know where all the true old guard of Bungie is, and to be honest, a lot of the old guard of Bungie has left the studio and is gone.
Yeah.
I mean, some names are a welcome departure, like Martin O'Donnell, who's a tirade of suspect stuff, to names that are actually really horrifying to lose, like Mark Noseworthy, Luke Smith. I mean, ages ago, departing for other things and making his own studio, there was Marcus Leto, who was behind the original design of Master Chief. You have other people who are more recent but still represent really strong foundations from way, way, way back in Bungie. And of course, I mean, I can't sit there and not talk about Salvatore.
Yep.
His loss from the studio as well is just another example of that.
That was last year, yeah.
Yeah.
And even, I believe, Christopher Barrett also left earlier this year.
Christopher Barrett's a bit of a weird story, because the question mark over him was that when Marathon was announced, he was listed as the creative director.
Yeah, he was.
And for the longest time on his bio, he had creative director listed in there at Bungie on an unannounced project. And then shortly after that, a bunch of stuff seemed to happen, and he quietly seemed to sort of leave the project. So his place in the studio is a very big question mark, but I have no idea what's going on with Christopher Barrett, I'll be completely honest.
Yeah, it was announced that they replaced him as the creative director or lead director of Marathon, but they didn't announce his departure. But then someone else, I think another Bungie employee, said that he had left months prior. So there's a lot of, major faces that probably the most recognizable would be Luke Smith. He is very much I'd say the most recognizable person at Bungie. And what's interesting about him is that he and Mark Noseworthy, who is also a titan of Bungie, less recognizable because he's more behind the scenes, but Luke Smith has always been at the forefront in trailers, very community facing. But Mark Noseworthy and Luke Smith were working on Project Payback, which we've heard a lot about recently. The first time we heard about Project Payback was earlier this year, when someone on Reddit leaked that Prismatic was a thing and correctly predicted it before it was released. And then in the same post also said that Destiny 3 is in development and it's called Project Payback.